Hello everyone. Hope you all are doing well and keeping safe. Welcome to today's technical talk session, and this is the second session of the series, and this is being organized and presented by DEFCON Group Trivandrum. This is a weekly series wherein each week you will find one presenter who would come and deliver a technical talk on any interesting session. So it's me today, and today I'll be taking you through the various fileless malware threats and how these essentially differ from the traditional malwares. So let me quickly move forward and share some insights about me. I am Nimna, and I have been a security professional for a little more than 9 years now. My I am part of the digital forensic team at my organization, and my day-to-day activity would involve identifying different incidents, security incidents, threats, as well as responding to them and taking proper actions. I'm extremely passionate about digital defensive security, and as part of it, I constantly undergo a lot of trainings that keeps me updated with the new technology or the new skills that I should be aware of, and also possess certain industry certifications like SANS and among others. I am also the proudly I am one of the part of the winning team for the Red Team Village Organized CTF Challenge at Coco in 2019, and also I've been with DEFCON Trivandrum for more than 2 years now. So that's it, and that's a lot about me. I'll not keep you all waiting, and I'll take you to the session today, which is the file about fileless malware. Before we head there, a quick disclaimer about the session today. Everything that I say today and the individual. So that's a quick disclaimer that I would start with. All right. So why are we here? I mean, what am I? I mean, I told you I'm a cybersecurity professional. So why is a cybersecurity professional required or important? So if we say that, what are we trying to secure or defend? So basically, what happens is today in the digital world, the most important thing that we have is data. So data is what is information. So it can be in any form, mostly digital, since I'm dealing with digital forensics. So the data can be personal, it can be organizational data, it can be a client data, it can be a government data. So it can be any data. So for a cybersecurity professional, the ultimate goal is to secure data and avoid that data to get into someone who is not authorized, or someone who should is taking advantage of some loopholes and misusing that particular data. So, okay, what is cyber attacks? Cyber attacks is basically an attacker who is trying, his best or her best to get hold of data, confidential data, which can be misused in the form of for monetary benefits or state sponsored anything of that sort. So everything comes under cyber attack. And how is a cyber attack performed, maybe, or what are the top cyber attacks that we have seen in the recent past? So these are the ones. I mean, malware. It can be using a malware. It can be done via phishing. It can be denial of service, or it can be using SQL injection, zero-day attacks. So there's a lot of ways in which a cyber attack is launched. And being a cybersecurity professional, we should be in a position to handle each of these attack, or either prevent it, or should be able to quickly respond to it, so that the damage is as is lessened as soon as possible, because more that an organization or information is under attack, it's vulnerable again. So we have to be very quick. So that is the first thing. You have to be quick to identify, quick to respond, and quick to remediate. All right. So like in the previous slide we saw, okay, the top that is gonna was on the list is malware. So what is a malware? Malware is like anything. It can be, it's just a soft piece of software that is tweaked somehow, and it's used for a malicious purpose. So it's more of a malicious code that is being used, and it can be used against the organization. Often the individual is unaware, and these are some specially crafted softwares that can be sent to any individual in a numerous ways that it can reach the victim or the target system or the target individual, and it can be leveraged to exfil data or cause further damages to the company, which would include branding issues or potential leak of data, or it can end up into a lot of financial and as well as legal issues. So malware is one thing. I mean, even if for a personal system, if you see like there's a malware on my system, so that would be one thing, like, oh, okay, so that something has to be done, something is not right. So the machine is trying to tell you, if the AV is able to catch or trigger an alarm, or is able to inform you that there is a malware in the system, the quickest action would be you should be able to identify or at least address what the malware is trying to do, so that we can take appropriate steps. So okay. So these are like just the basic ones. So what are the different malware types that we have seen? So these are the malwares keep evolving. So basically, the attackers, they do something, and then the defenders will try and find out how to prevent that. So then it is an ongoing cycle, and then the attackers would come up with something else, and then it's basically not entirely different, but it's like a slight tweaking here and there, and then the malware keeps evolving. So it is not that it's a once for all solution that can be we have. So virus, adware, rootkit, spyware, these are like a few of the malwares that we have seen in the past. There are much more than this, but I just put a few of them. So these would be each malware or the malicious code or malicious software has a specific functionality or a specific function associated with it. So if you look at adware, so or if you look at spyware, so spyware would be something that would be on your host, and like how spies are, right? So they just try and um, send out the information out somewhere. So it can be like a keylogger, or it can get the data from your system, or like your browsing history or your personal files that you have saved, or the something like that. So all these kind of malwares, they have a specific functionality, and that is how they are named. But all in all, each of them are bad, and we should not have them on our system, or if we should be able to prevent getting on these from these files. So the last one is the fileless malware. So it is also kind of malware. Okay. So basically the goal of any malware would be to get onto a host, try and do what logic it has inbuilt logic in it. So whatever it is trying to do, maybe it's trying to get the credentials of the host or the user or the admin privileges, or if it's trying to get into the files, and it can send it across to someone else like who should not get it, or anything of a ransomware is more like it's more a kind of way where the your files gets encrypted, and it's more for money, right? So ransomware would be you pay this particular x amount of ransom is when you will get your files back. So it's all like the different kinds of malwares we would see and we have seen in the recent past. Okay, so next is the like I said, there is no just one way we can categorize it, but the endpoint threats, like endpoint is basically, of course, the host machine, or where the information is stored, which the attacker is trying to exfil or attacker is trying to take control of. So the endpoint, what are the top endpoint threats that it would have is this is basically based on the indicators of compromise. So if you see that this is based on the one of the Open Intel report that I could see, this is for the first half of 2020, wherein the top of the list was fileless malware with 30% of the security. Basically, it's from a security vendor who gave out a report stating like what kind of IOCs are being observed in the in the open internet. So they have mentioned that more than 30% or almost 30% of the clients that they are servicing have indicated that the malware or the threat that they saw was from a fileless malware. Similarly, there is next is the next close is 24% at dual use tools. So what are dual use tools? So there are certain tools that like PowerShell Empire, for example. So that is a tool that has dual purpose. It can be used for a legitimate activity, in the sense it can be used for pen testing that is done, with the approval and in accordance with the organization's guidelines, or they are aware of it, and they do a pen testing to identify what is the security posture, what is that they are lacking, and those kind of things. Similarly, the same tool can be used by an attacker, because it it has a capability to scan the system, or get internal data from the system. So attackers, if it's executed by the attacker, that can be really bad. It's important for us to so know that just because it's a PowerShell Empire might not be enough to say that it's an attacker or it's bad, but the purpose of the execution of the tool, or the person, or why the situation, why it was run, all those things have to be considered before we can make a determination that was it actually a security incident, or it was an internal pen testing activity, or a legitimate usage of those tools. Similarly, next is the credential dumping tools, like 21%. These tools would also, like, is kind of a dual use tool. It has the capability to get the credentials from the system, or yeah, basically they do get credentials from the system. So if it is for the legitimate purpose, we know that okay, that is done in accordance to what is supposed to be done. But if the credentials gets into the hands of an attacker, we surely are in a big problem. The attacker can use those credentials to laterally move in the organizations, or perform any kind of activity, and since they already have the credentials, it might be very difficult to detect and prevent it. So it is difficult for the security tools that are configured to identify if the credentials are already exposed, and with the attackers, or they get a strong foothold on the one of the host, and they can pivot it to using it as a pivot, they can move around laterally within the organization. They might even get to the domain controller. So we all know how dangerous that can be. So the percentages might vary, but somehow it would almost land in almost with these kind of threats that we see. But definitely, fileless malware is something that is emerging, and this is something that is very difficult to detect. So it's always a challenge for the security defenders, I would say, to identify or prevent whenever there is a fileless malware involved. So moving forward, okay. So next is living off the land. So this is like living off the land, right? The name actually it's there's like two explanation for it. So if you look into the nature, or the physical world, living off the land would be like if a person is stranded on an island, and he's a guest there or a visitor there. So basically, he might have to survive or deal with whatever is present on that island. So what happens is, whatever is there, he makes the best use of it, and somehow adjusts, and keeps low keeps a low profile, and whatever fruits that he has, and he's gonna eat that. He's not gonna get his own food from outside, or something like that. So what living off the land basically means, whatever is present, just make best use of it. And on a technical term, especially in the cyber world, living off the land would mean attacker would use the applications or the tools that are already present on the host, and would not introduce a new tool or a file into the host to perform the malicious activity that it is intending to do. So how it helps? Is it is helpful for them, because since there is no external file that is to be dropped or introduced to the host, it the security tools won't be flagging it off. Okay, so when they see that, oh, there's no host, no problem with the files, or all files are the Windows basic files or the users files. So it is very easy to just overlook the file. So it might be able to do certain malicious logic running or certain activities, but on the first look it won't look like okay there's something else, because introduction of a new file, we all know that AV is waiting to scan that particular file. So if it's a malicious file, it's like gone at the same time. But when you use something that is the native files or the native binaries, that wouldn't be the case. So, how or what happens when the living off the land technique is used? It can stay undetected for months. Like I said, if us if the security tool is not able to identify that is this tool being used for a malicious purpose or not, it might never flag that. So until and unless it actually sees a different kind of behavior, it is just gonna say that okay, there's nothing wrong with it. So it can actually stay undetected for months to years together. Also, the legitimate system shells, that is inbuilt tools what I was mentioning, it can be used to download or perform stage 2 droppers on the host. So what happens is they will leverage the internal tools to download or get further instructions from the C2 servers, or the instructions from the attacker on how to proceed, or is to be done once the host is compromised. So that's the stage 2 droppers that it has the capability to download. Similarly, since it stays undetected for months, there can be a constant exfiltration of data, and it can be like in such minute proportions that it will be never be flagged in the security monitoring or security tools. And since it's gonna be stay in the system for a very long time, the data exfil, a huge amount of data exfil can happen with almost the user is unaware, or that something like this is happening. So that is also one of the advantages that they have when they use the living off the land techniques. Similarly, yeah, the most commonly what we see is the fileless malware, which leverages the living off the land capabilities in the Windows host machines. Um Moving forward, so what is this? This technical talk is all about fileless malware. So I've been talking about a different kind of malwares, a lot of other things. So what exactly is fileless malware? As far as the name suggests, it is fileless, right? There's no file involved. So okay? So like there's no file. So where is the malware? And yeah, that exactly is what this makes this special. So there is no file. So since there is no file, AVs or the security teams won't be able to detect it, and it uses legitimate programs like PowerShell or WMI, and it can interact with the system using those legitimate applications, and it can further infect that particular host or the computer. And it can also abuse the various tools that are built into the operating system, and it can further launch attacks. And in a nutshell, if we say that fileless malware is basically you're turning the Windows itself into, I mean, against itself. So it's like the Windows inbuilt tools are acting against them on the instructions from an attacker. So it's more like Windows is turned against itself. And it, like I mentioned, the fileless malware often leverages the living off the land capabilities. All right, so fileless category, attack category. Basically, fileless, it's a lot of things that is brought together and called as fileless malware. So it's not like it has an ABC definition that would be sticking to. So fileless has various types. They have various categories. So the just top three, or commonly used categories what is mentioned here. So type one would be when there is like no file at all. So it's completely fileless. What they're gonna use in this particular kind of attack is they're gonna use the vulnerabilities based on the firmware. So there is no need to send a file onto the host. There is no need to drop any payload on the host. What they can use is they can exploit the various vulnerability that is present inbuilt. In the sense, we have seen a lot of zero-day vulnerabilities wherein the firmware has to do with it, and they are able to launch certain exploits against it. And it's something that is like truly fileless, and that is a type 1. Then for on the type 2, there is like an indirect file activity. So although there is no malware, or I'm sorry, no file that is being dropped onto the host, but they might use certain system files indirectly. In the sense, they might use some registries to store some commands, and that would in further down launch certain or perform or execute certain task. And yeah, so that is somehow the indirect file activities there. There is no file, but they can still use inbuilt files. And last ones is they would need some files to operate. So in that particular case, the system has to, once an attacker gets a foothold or a hold onto the system, they have to sustain that connection, because it's not easy to get into the system on a daily basis. So once you already have a connection or a presence onto one host, it's important for them to create some kind of persistence or a backdoor, which is usually via the scheduled task or the auto runs or something like that. Like every time it would keep getting a heartbeat of, okay, like this particular host is still compromised. So that is something that would come under file type 3. So it's more based on persistence. And fileless attack types. So one of the attack, first one, like there's no 1, 2, and 3, it's just like listed together. First is the registry resident malware. So these would stay in the registry, and it would establish itself or install within the Windows registry. And every time it's referenced, the malware can be executed, and it is able to hence establish persistence, and it's also able to uh, avoid detection. Like registries, not all is not over constant monitoring. So since they might look legitimate, they might just be overlooked in the sense like, okay, that this might be something that is legitimate. So that is how registry resident malware works. The next would be a memory only malware. This file would only reside in the memory. So they just do not touch the file system. And like we know, AVs usually act upon the files that are present on the host. So if there is no file in the system, there is no way the AV would come into action or take any action against those files. So they only stay in the memory, and they are a perfect backdoor. And what would they do? I mean, they are able to perform reconnaissance, they can do lateral movement, and further move into the organization, and also are capable of performing a data exfiltration. So they are, yeah, so the memory malware or memory only malware is very, very, very tough to detect, and but the damage is like huge that they can do. The last one, or maybe not the last one, but the other type would be the fileless ransomware. So ransomware, we know what happens is there would be some file that somehow gets into the host machine, maybe user downloads, or somehow it just reaches that host, and what they do is one by one they start encrypting the entire disk, all the files, and then they would change it to some weird extensions, and then they would leave a ransom note. And what the ransom note would predominantly tell, like how embed certain codes into document, or the exploit is written in such a way that they can directly execute from memory. And they what they would be using for encryption is not a custom application, but they would be using the administrative tools that are already present in the host to encrypt those files. So, and once the files are encrypted, there is no way that the user can decrypt it, because like we know how ransomware works. So that way, it's very difficult again. Uh, okay, so that's the top the types of fileless attacks that we have seen. Next, what we have is how is the fileless malware, what are the various Windows native files that the fileless malware can leverage? So, what, like I mentioned before, it is solely working on the inbuilt trusted Windows binaries that it uses to hide itself, and few of them are listed here. The top one is PowerShell. So we all know like what PowerShell is. It is something that is so trusted and so useful for any admin or in the system, that it has great capabilities. It can interact with system file. It can do a lot of things that is required for admin purpose or others. There is a lot of scripting that can be done, or a lot of things. Basically, it's very useful, very nice, very helpful. But it can also be used by the attackers. So PowerShell is a native tool which is a cross-platform used for automation, and it's by Microsoft. So there is no way, like just because a PowerShell is running, no one is going to detect that okay, there is a malware. It always has to be like, okay, it's PowerShell, it has to run, like it's a system. But uh, in the bad hands, it can be disastrous. Similarly, other native files would be the WMI. It is also a native file which is used for managing the system. A lot of admin level works. It has great capabilities. It can interact with the system settings, system properties, user groups. It can enlist a lot of things for the admin, like I said. But in the hands of an attacker, it's gonna be really bad. Like that, we have like .NET framework or the macros. So macros is one thing that was a very useful thing for us or any programmer. So they can, this macros are usually associated with Word or Excel spreadsheets. They can club in a lot of steps together. So instead of doing like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a sequential step, that can be all tagged together in one macro. And when the macro runs, it just do that all those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps together. So it's like very useful or very easy for us to um, work with. But the problem is you have to enable macros for it to work, and it's very easy for I mean, the user might not be that technically sound to understand what kind of macros are being run. All they're going to see is a yellow ribbon at the top, which says enable macro. And very innocently, they might just go and click it. Okay, it's asking to enable macros. Like, I know like macros are used for a good purpose. Let me enable it. So that is how it usually happens. They enable it, and that is all the attacker wants. So once they get the macro, they have their logic written. They embed a lot of things into the file which might not be directly visible to the user. So in the background, they can be used to download certain things, upload certain things, make some registry changes, create accounts, dump credentials, a lot of things. So, and on for the user, they would just see that okay, it did these steps 1, 2, 3, 4, and like I got the output. And on the back end for the attacker, the macro might have done a lot more. So those are some of the things that the fileless malware uses to propagate into the host and make the malicious logic run. All right, so let's go quickly. I just quickly take you to two examples how the fileless attack works. It's so common for us, the users, to get a lot of spam mails or a lot of phishing mails. Like we all work with Outlook in and out, so it's like every time we keep getting emails, and some users might be receiving these emails and spam mails. Like we see plenty of them. So if the attacker is targeting someone or just launching a organization wide attack, he might just send it to thousands of individuals within that organization, and one, like just one out of those thousand, if he or she clicks that particular link, it in this particular example, how it works is that the user is clicking on that link, and that link will then redirect the user to a website where Flash is which loads Flash, and then the it is able to exploit trigger the exploit. And with that, what happens is the shell code would internally launch PowerShell and using command line, and then it will download and execute further payloads in memory. So the user might not even see anything like that happening. So once that happens, it can further download the stage 2 dropper into it. It can get more scripts. It can download other executables, and also the user might get a remote connection out of it, and then they can play around with the system and get whatever they want to. So that is one of the way how a very safe looking file might end up opening the system to the attacker, and they might misuse it with the access they got. So that is how, like, one example. And the second one is more of a macro related file. So this is what I was explaining. The user might get a document macro, and the macro runs. It can use the native files like PowerShell to download the further scripts, and then the file, once onto the host, can perform its task involving creation of schedule task, persistence, auto runs, as well as data exfil. And once there's a scheduled task, then we know like every day or every scheduled time it's going to execute and perform that particular activity, be it data exfil, be it downloading further files, or doing a lateral movement into the host environment. So when we already know a lot about this kind of malware, why is that like AV is not able to handle it, or why is that the AV vendors are not coming up with signatures that would protect the users? Well, we are paying a lot for these particular AVs. The antivirus company, why is that they are not able to handle it? So the problem is in the kind of malware it is, the fileless. So there is no file, and most AVs usually works on the signatures. So for signature, there has to be a file, and there is no particular a file like ABC that it can have a matching signature. So it's always it's never gonna be that a same file might be seen on two different hosts. Also, when the process executes is usually the native tools like PowerShell or WMI. No, AV cannot keep flagging for each PowerShell execution. AV cannot just keep blocking all macros, because there can be scenarios where it's actually good, and AV, if it keeps blocking, then it's just gonna be like a lot of false positives. And like I said, Windows registry files, that is usually not scanned for any changes or anything of that sort. So AV is that is why AV usually has a problem in dealing with the malware when it's a fileless malware. So what happens is if a host is already infected or compromised with a fileless malware, all that only time then that it gets detected would be, I would say, when it starts showing its behavior. So if it is configured, or if it is coded to reach to a C2 or an external domain where it can get further instructions, only the time when it's going to contact is when it's getting flagged, like, "Oh, okay, so why is this PowerShell or why is this system contacting a C2?" That is when the alarms would be up, and that is when everyone would get in the firefighting mode, and try finding out what happened, what, and then is when we would see that, oh, this PowerShell looks abnormal, and why is it doing something like this? So that is how difficult it is to deal with wireless malware when it comes to traditional AV. Uh, Basically, the absence of files is what makes it more complex, and it's more of a memory resident thing. So it's again difficult. All right. So what can be done? I mean, is it like we can't do anything about it? No. I mean, we can. Like I said, the type one that I had shown. It's more dealing with the firmware vulnerabilities. So keep updated, get the latest patches, get the latest hardwares, uh, know what is being in your system, what kind of 0 days are being in the wild. So based on that, we can take some actions, and that would be important to combat fileless malware. Secondly, it's very important to raise the security awareness within the people. So all the AVs, all the systems that we have would fail if the user themselves are not security aware. So if they know that this is a spam mail, or this site is something that should not be visited, or if they know how a malicious macro works, it's the possibility of them enabling the macro for a document from an untrusted sender would highly reduce. So it's important to raise awareness within your organization, get to people know how and what can go wrong and what is wrong. Also, it's important for the security professionals to know what is normal, because only if you know what is normal and what are the normal usage of Windows native tools or PowerShell or WMI, is when we would be able to identify what is abnormal. And all abnormal executions should be tracked and should be investigated. It wouldn't be that one fine day PowerShell is behaving like normal. If it does, there definitely can is a possibility that there is something wrong with that host, and that has to be investigated and found out, and should be remediated at the earliest, because we just cannot overlook something that is just believing that it's a Windows native tool and it's okay to do that. That's completely wrong. We have to be very aware and look for abnormalities, and that would help us figure out things at the first instance. We definitely do not have to wait for the second stage to execute so that we get a signature or a kind of traffic to the C2. To we don't have to wait until that time to know that what is happening on the host. We can take preventive steps at the first time. Implement the principle of least privilege. So that is more for the admin, right? Admin person. So admin, like we know, domain admins or enterprise admins, the administrative users have a lot of privileges with their accounts. If that account gets compromised, it's going to be very very difficult, and the attacker can do a lot of damage to the organization. So it's important to implement the principle of least privilege. Only the necessary permissions should be provided to the users, and only then they if account gets compromised, the damage can be reduced. Also, it's important to apply the behavioral and statistical analysis to identify the malicious behavior than just the malicious code. So when we see something is a code on the host, it's important to understand how that code would evolve, or how the code would what are the codes that what are the steps that the code is going to do to when it gets executed. So it's important to analyze the code and understand what would happen when this gets executed. All right, so I think with that I'm almost at the end of the session. So thank you so much for joining me. I would love to hear from you. You can join our official DEFCON group on Facebook, on Discord. We're also on Twitter as well as LinkedIn. So we definitely do join our Discord channel. There is a lot of activities that happen on it. If you have any questions regarding today's session, I am available on my Discord channel, and it's the handle is listed on the screen. Yeah, so stay connected. We are the DEFCON Trivandrum group, and I would love to hear your comments and feedbacks. And there is a lot of sessions that would be upcoming. This particular breakout sessions that was presented today is part of a weekly exercise that would be performed. So stay tuned for next week, when we would have another presenter that would come up with another new topic. And till then, stay safe, take care, and thank you.